I was at a festival in Nashville, Tennessee. It's called the Tennessee Grassroots Days, and a friend of mine was the guitar player for sort of backing up like everybody that was playing that day. It was outside, and it was a wonderful big festival, and all these people were playing, and this woman, Phyllis Boyens, had a set, and she sang this song that I loved. It was called Love Crisis. And so I went up to her afterwards and I said, I really like your song, Love Crisis. And she said, oh, well, I didn't actually write that song. My friend Joyce Brookshire wrote that. She's from Atlanta. I said, oh, well, I'm from Atlanta. The minute I got back, the first thing I saw, you know how those things work, the first thing I saw in the paper was that Cabbagetown Three Women was being performed at the Alliance Theater. So I went to see the show, and then I went up to Joyce afterwards. I started talking to her about her song, and we just got to talking, and we just became fast friends and musical partners forever. That was about 1978, I believe. We would play anywhere where people wanted us because we love to play. We love to sing harmonies together. When you sing in choirs, your ear gets used to just kind of taking in the sound and then coming, like when you sing, you're like singing into the sound. And when Joyce and I would sing together, we would like just find that place between the two of us that was the one song. Every year we always played at the Cabbagetown reunion. And then we would also go up to Savannah Street and play at the Mission. And when folks were having lunch, we'd go up there and sing songs. The thing about Cabbagetown is everybody knew Joyce and everybody knew her songs. And so, you know, we'd go and everybody could sing the songs with us. And the reunion was always amazing because, you know, a lot of Cabbagetown folks moved out of Cabbagetown after the mill closed down, but they would all come back. One of the things about Joyce's songs, like when I sing I didn't start writing songs until semi-recently. So I would sing, you know, a lot of other people's songs, and I would always, to make a song mine, I would always change a little something here or there. With Joyce's songs, there's never any need to change anything because they're so well crafted. She spent so much time creating the sound that she wanted and the words that she wanted to tell the story that she was going to tell. So she worked at the Patch, and she painted tiles. They made commemorative tiles, and she would sit at her desk and have all her paints, and she would sit there and she would paint, and I would come in and I'd sit across from her, and while she was painting, she would sing me whatever new song she'd written. And I'd have my guitar, and so I would listen to the song, and I would like try to find the chords for it. She had the entire arrangement in her mind. She could hear exactly what the song would sound like if she was recording it, right? And so I would play, you know, this chord or that chord, and then she'd go, no, not that one. And I'd try like a relative chord. She'd go, yeah, that's it. That's how we figured out like songs, and then I would like write them down. So when we recorded, Joyce, I mean, she knew exactly what she wanted each song to sound like. You know, she knew this one needed to have a horn section. This one should not be guitars. This should be piano. You know, this one should have like just vocals with just vocals and bass or whatever. She could hear the music in her mind. You know, when she grew up, her neighbor had the first phonograph in Cabbagetown, and she would play all this different kind of music. And so Joyce heard lots of kind of music, and she loved soul music, country music, rock and roll, all of it. She loved it. You can hear all those influences in her music. But like I said, you know, she could just hear exactly what she wanted on that. And then she would just tell us, and we would get the musicians to come, you know, to play on it. And everybody loved playing with her. As you know, her songs range from like hilarious, like Fishing Fever and Go Away Prince Charming and those, and then really on point, you know, super hard-hitting political songs that were speaking to what was going on in the day. But the interesting thing is, like, for example, her song John Philip Sousa, you can't eat John Philip Sousa, you can't make a foxhole a home, because on the streets of America, old soldiers are dying alone. That song she wrote, you know, probably 30 plus years ago. Well, it's just as relevant today. She wrote a song about Georgia Power when there was a bunch of stuff going on with the power company, and she wrote "What'll We Do with the Homeless When the Olympics Come to Town," which was a question that people wanted as they were organizing the Olympics. That's an important question to think about, and not one that was being brought up. And so she wrote this, amazing song. She was definitely an activist, and she knew that she wanted her music to serve, besides being entertaining. As I said, she wrote really fun, hilarious songs, and she wrote a bunch of love songs. But she felt like her mission, her job, was really to let her music serve the people around her, serve the people of Cabbagetown. So for one thing, she was a repository of history. Her song Cabbagetown Ballad is about the history of Cabbagetown. And her song Whatever Became of Me, every person in that song is a real person. I love playing that song. When I played it at the memorial, I was like, okay, if you're in this song, will you raise your hand? And all these Cabbagetown people are like, yes, me. I think she really got inspired when she was invited to go up to the Highlander Center in Tennessee. And the Highlander was a gathering place for people that were working on important issues. It literally was where Rosa Parks decided to sit on the bus. Dr. King was there back in the 20s and 30s. It was where labor union people would meet. During the Civil Rights Movement, it was the only place where black and white people could meet together and organize together. I would say in the 70s is when she went. And the thing about Highlander was there were always amazing people gathered there together. And so she met incredible songwriters like Cy Kahn and Guy Carawan, who actually lived at the Highlander. And Guy Carawan, he and his wife Candy, they had lived out on the Georgia Sea Islands and collected a lot of that music. But Guy fell in love with Joyce's music, and he took her on tour with him. He was from California, and so she actually went out to California with him and sang her music. So the Highlander's right outside of Knoxville, and for a while she was sort of living back and forth in Knoxville and Atlanta. I just saw Betty Bean, who's a journalist up in Knoxville, and she said that Joyce, she'd get a call, Betty, come down to the bus station and pick me up. I'm coming back up. And then she would go stay with Betty for a few weeks or months, and then she'd call Klein to come pick her up again to come back to Atlanta. So she didn't like move to Knoxville, but she was like kind of living in Knoxville and in Atlanta. They had a band called the Phantoms of the Opry. And it was her and Phyllis Boyens who was the person who I first heard sing Love Crisis. It was the only time where she really wasn't living in Cabbagetown or in Atlanta, per se. And I think it really opened up her vistas as well. These are friends of hers from up in the Tennessee mountains, and that area is really the Appalachian region. It's 3 different states, but it's really one area. So it's Southwest Virginia, Eastern Kentucky, and Eastern Tennessee. So this is Joan Boyd, who is the wife of Ron Short. And Ron was actually one of Joyce's biggest friends, Ron and Joan both. But she admired him so much, wonderful songwriter. And he was on the first record that she made, which was the North Georgia Mountains, which was the first Foxfire record. And so that was all like folks from up there. So all of those people that were on that record got together up there. We had a gathering at the Highlander. Oh my gosh, she was hilarious. No, she was totally hilarious. As you might have guessed from looking at, she had this one period where she would take photos and she would put little comic strip bubbles. She'd cut them out of the paper and paste them over the pictures. She has really funny songs, like the whole Prince Charming, go away, Prince Charming, ain't nobody here for you. Ain't nothing you can teach me, I don't know how to do. And then she took that, like, I think 10 years later when Ronald Reagan was in office, she wrote, go away, Ronald Reagan, we don't want you hanging round, etc., with more detail. So do you know her song about Loganville? Nobody knows you're living when you're living in Loganville, right? It's like, so somebody in Cabbage Town, I can't remember who it was, but their mother or mother-in-law lived in Loganville and needed a caretaker. So Joyce went out and she was going to be the caretaker for this woman and, you know, just kind of be in the house for her. I was going to say cook for her, but Joyce did not cook. She also did not drive, which was a problem if you lived in Loganville, because as the song says, it's pretty far out there. So she wrote this song, right? I wake up each morning just about 5:30. I hold a mirror to my mouth to see if I'm alive. Anyway, so this song is like, you know, really kind of a little bit pejorative about Loganville. A few years ago, I get this call, and it's the city administrator from Loganville. And he said, we've heard your song about Loganville, and we want to know if you would come out to our festival and sing it. I was like, are you sure you've heard this song? He said, yes, it's very funny. We like it. So I made one of these for me and one for Joyce. This notebook has all of her songs, all the lyrics and chords. Sometimes she had written them out by hand. Sometimes she would type them. This is before computers, so she would type them on the typewriter. And then also the chord charts. But then I also put all kinds of wonderful things, because Joyce, we had a big benefit for her in 1992, and senators, the governor, folks from the Highlander, everybody wrote letters about how wonderful she was and how powerful her music was. So there's like, you know, from the governor, from Zell Miller was governor at the time, et cetera, et cetera. But, you know, here we are performing. Here's a big hootenanny in Grant Park at the Mosier's house. She was not very healthy later in her life, and she had emphysema, and she had a lot of trouble with her lungs and breathing. And in 1995, when we made this record, Cabbage Town Ballad, she could barely walk. She could barely breathe. We drove her right up to the door of the studio. This was right here in Pine Lake. And she got out of the car, and we helped her into the studio, and she's sitting on her stool. She's barely able to breathe. And then the music starts, and she just sings. No problems. So everything, you know, for her, music was her life. One of the songs that I love of hers, besides every other song of hers that I love, is the song Only Through the Music. And it says, it's only through the music I can be anything. And she talks about when she was a kid, when she was little, you know, when life was hard and confusing. She says, I would go off with a pencil and paper, and I would come back with a song that said everything I had to say. So, you know, I think as a shy child, she couldn't express herself well or, you know, deal with people as well, but then she would write some amazing song and that said way more than, you know, any of us would ever say when we're just speaking with words. One of the things she said when we made the last album, she said, this is as close to writing a memoir as I'll ever get. You know, this is my life here in the songs. And it's true. I mean, if you listen to her songs, if you listen to her records, that's her. She's hilarious. She's thoughtful. She's shy. She's super gregarious and fun to be around. Probably one of her most powerful songs, among her many powerful songs, is the Orchard song that she wrote about her father. He was a truck driver, and he would go off and then he would come back, and one day he drove off to get some apples and never came back. She never ever saw him again. And what does her song say though? How long does it take to grow an orchard, to pick all the apples one by one? 29 years is a long growing season, So I guess that's the reason my daddy's still gone. The song she wrote about her mom, she actually, on the CD, the last cut of the CD is her talking about her writing the songs. And she talks about, on that song, Lila Mae, she actually gives her mother the power to shut the door on the dad the last time he came, which I think isn't what really happened, but she wanted to make that, to change that narrative. You know, her mom died of brown lung, working 29 years in the mill. And her mom actually retired before retirement age. She's like, I had enough. Yeah. But I think, you know, without Joyce writing those songs, I think that the story of the mill and the story of Cabbagetown, the history of all that, I don't know that we would still have it, that we would all be interested in it and know about it. You know, I think her music is going to be one of the most powerful things to preserve the story of the people that came to work in that mill. And, you know, we say the people, but the people is a lot of individual people, and those people show up in her songs. And they, you know, they live in her songs. And the story of Cabbagetown lives in her songs, and her life lives in her songs. But it's not just her, it's not just Cabbagetown. It's like, there's a lot of other people whose fathers left, or who love to go fishing, or who have a Prince Charming that, you know, isn't so charming, like, go away, Prince Charming. I mean, it's, you know what they say for writers, it's like, the more personal you get, the more universal it is. And that, I think, that's her music. Her body of work is huge and powerful and beautiful and just as relevant now and will be in the future. I feel so lucky to have had her in my life for 38 years.